Hi everyone, it's Shaw from Scrap Secrets and welcome back to my channel. Today's video is part of my guest designer series for Doodles Paper Playground, which makes sparkle blends. And we're going to be using one of their newest releases called Fall Sports to create this football card. So there's the blend. We're going to be using Kindred Stamps Touchdown stamp set, as well as this Kindred Stamps stencil that I found in my stash, some Stampendous White embossing powder, and the Hero Arts ink cube, embossing powder ink cube, and then the mini ink blending tool. So I'm just laying the stencil down over top of the green cardstock, and it's at this point I don't realize that this is the laces to the football. I'm still thinking that this is the yard markers on a field for football. So that's why I did the green. And you can see here that I showed up close to the camera, you can see the difference between the one that I had inked up and the ones that I hadn't. It turns it a really dark green, so you can pretty much see where you've inked up already. So that makes it nice and easy. I'm just using that ink blending tool, dipping it into the embossing ink pad, and then kind of rotating it. I kind of went in a circular motion down the length of the laces and just made sure every little piece got embossing ink on it. Like I said, you can use the cube and go direct to the stencil and paper. If you have a Versamark ink pad, the larger ones, it might be a little bit more difficult. The cube would be much easier to do if you were going to go direct to paper, but you could use the larger one like this with the mini ink blending tool. So after I check and see that that last one didn't come out really well, I redo that again. And it's just about this time that I realize, hey, these are not markers, they are the laces for the football. So I am going to actually ink up a second piece, and that's the piece that we're going to use. You will see that I keep it on the left hand side. I do off camera and heat emboss that one as well, but I don't use it yet. And afterwards I thought about it, and I could probably get away with using it as yard markers, but it didn't really look right for this one. I didn't think it looked right, or the technique that I wanted to do. So I'm taking that embossing powder and pouring it on the top and then letting it fall to the bottom, and then just going in any areas that I missed. So the only difference between these two panels is one, the size. So the green piece is 4 by 5 1/4, and then the brown piece is 4 1/4 by 5 1/2 inches, which is an A2 size card. And then for the brown one, and the only reason I didn't do it on the green one was because I totally forgot until I started inking it up, is I used some light kaolin clay over top of it just so that it wouldn't stick in areas that didn't have the embossing powder, because sometimes there's fingerprints or there's oils or something like that on your paper, and sometimes the embossing powder will stick in areas you don't want it to. So I used this nesting star die, and I don't even know where it's from. I have it on my big board, to cut out the burst through the green paper. I wanted it to look like the football player was crashing through to score a touchdown. So I cut that out, I put that to the side, and then we're going to ink up the football player as well as the football with some Lawn Fawn jet black ink. This is just on really thin cardstock. I am going to be using Copic markers, but I don't do any blending on this. It's just kind of one color over everything. I didn't think that it needed blending to it. It was such a tiny image. I could have gone in with 2 colors, but I just decided not to. I just did some very, very basic Copic coloring. So I am right outside of Philadelphia, so the Philadelphia Eagles. Of course, I had to make it look like the Eagles. I already had green and white and black in the shaker blend, so I was like, I have to make it an Eagles player. So I picked some Copic markers that were the green and gray, closest to like the green and the gray that I possibly could. I used a C0 for the white parts of the helmet, and I actually think I colored in part of his knee and his shoe at one point. It was a little hard to tell exactly what some of the pieces were on his legs, because his leg is actually kicked back, so I kind of made the bottom part be his shoe, like his foot was kind of coming forward, but I don't know if you can really even tell. And so I am going to finish coloring these in with some Copic markers, and then I am going to fussy cut them out. I don't normally fussy cut things, and when I fussy cut the football out, I actually cut off piece of it. I was so mad. I was done, and that was the last thing I cut out, and I was almost finished, and my scissors slipped. I was so mad. It took a little chunk of the top out, but I'm going to do something else with it, and you're not really going to notice it. So I'm going to finish up Copic coloring, and then we are going to move on to the next step, which is stamping on that green layer that we created. So there are a couple of sentiments in the Touchdown stamp set, including the word touchdown. So I thought that would be really cute to go at the bottom right-hand corner of the piece. So I inked that up with that same Lawn Fawn jet black ink, stamped that down, and then I'm taking that same football that we colored and I'm going to stamp it in different positions around the entire piece. I wanted it to look like pattern paper, so I am going to stamp it off of the paper. I'm going to turn the football around to the sides, and there is one football, I think it's right here, that I stamp, and it didn't look really good. So I tried to stamp it over, and I know better than this. I know that I can never line things up properly, so it double stamped a little bit. And I'm going to show you, that's actually what I'm going to do. I'm going to put that colored football over top of that. I could have colored a couple more footballs and put them around to just not make it look so, I don't know if it looked out of place. You guys have to let me know in the comments. Does it look out of place that I did that, or does it just look like I was trying to cover up a mistake? I thought it needed a little bit more color on the front, so that just gave it a pop of color, but maybe I needed to do more than one football. So definitely let me know down in the comments what you think. So to make it look a little bit more like pattern paper, I'm going to mask off the word touchdown with just a scrap piece of paper, and I'm going to stamp one of the footballs over top of it to make it look like the word touchdown is actually going over top of it. And that'll be the last thing that I do before, because that space was empty right there. I don't always have the best judgment on how far to space things out. So I'm going to go ahead and figure out the placement of that, stamp that down, and it's going to look like it was almost, the word touchdown was going through that last football. And I tried to see if I could fit one more, but I didn't. So now I'm taking a white pit pen and going around the edges of the football where those lines are and just putting in some white. Again, adding a little bit more color. I could have gone ahead and done this brown as well, but I didn't want there to be so much brown on the card. The background was brown. I didn't want this the back part of it was brown. I didn't want the front to be brown as well. But now that I'm thinking about it, if I did this card over again, which is, I tend to do that when I go back and do the voiceovers for this video, I think about what I would have done differently if I decide to do this card again, and I probably would have done it in reverse. I probably would have just went ahead with the green background and then gone and done the top with brown and then just added the white to this. And then maybe the football player would have stood out a little bit more because it was on, although it was on a green background, it was popped up off of that, and then the front would be brown. So again, let me know in the comments what you think. If you, maybe I'll do another version of this and see which one I like better. So once I was done adding all those white lines, I just took that paint, that pit pen, and just went around and added little dots. I thought it looked a little bit plain and it needed something to fill in those gaps. I just thought the white dots would look cute. So once that was done, I'm going to add a little bit of glue with my Be Creative Honeybee glue to the back of that football and pop that football into place. And then we are going to get started with the acetate for the shaker part of the card. So Sparkle Blends also does carry acetate in the shop. So I am using the Sparkle Blends acetate, and I am just going to cut it down to a little bit larger than the size of that burst. Then we're going to get ready to put the foam tape on. So there are a couple different ways to do the foam tape. I actually do 2 layers because I think the foam tape that I got that Big Mama roll from, I think it's 3M tape that I got. It's a little bit, it's not very high, but it comes in thicker strips. So you could go in and go all the way around this burst and kind of follow the burst and make it go all the way around. Or you could do what I did, which is a little bit more of the lazy way. I just kind of made a square around the whole thing. That way the shaker pieces would come in and out, and it doesn't just stay behind the burst. So if you go around the edges of the burst, it will be less area for your shaker bits to move in, so you won't get them lost in places that are not cut out. So with this one, as you'll see when I make the big square, there are going to be times where there are shaker pieces that you're not going to be able to see because they're in spots that are covered with the cardstock. So what I decided to do was take each strip and cut it into thirds, and I'm going to do 2 layers of each of these ones. And with the with the scraps, I'm going to go ahead and use those on the back of the football player and pop him up on 1 layer of dimension. But I do use 2 layers here because, again, I think that this foam is it's not high enough for what I wanted. I wanted to make sure all of my shaker pieces move very freely. So I'm going to cut that down to the size that I want. And once I have all of that in there, I'm going to take my brush, and I have a little bit of that powder left on there, and just run it on the sides to make sure that there's no sticky parts to the sides. Sometimes if there's not a piece that's covered all the way by the top layer, you may have a little bit of stick. So this is the way that it'll take it off of there. I dumped the blend out into a container, and for some reason I was using my hand instead of using the sparkle stick that I had. So eventually I will switch over to the sparkle stick, and I was going through to make sure that I only got the football pieces, the green, the white, and the black. That's really what I wanted. So there's little green gems in there. There are some sequins, and then there are some, I also put some gold stars in there. I put 2 gold stars in there. So I'm just going through and taking out the pieces of the blends that I want, which is so great. I usually love making my own mix. Normally I would use more than one, but for this one it was kind of a specific mix with sports. So I decided to just keep it to this one. So you can see I'm just going through and seeing how it shakes and seeing how much more I need. If you do the smaller one, area where you go around exactly around the shape of it, so if you kind of bend your foam tape, you'll have a smaller area, so you won't need as many shaker pieces. So because I did the bigger square, I decided I needed more pieces in there because some of them are going to be hidden at some points. So once I was finished all of that, I'm going to take the backing off all of the foam tape, which is not fun. That's my least favorite part of it. And then I'm going to take that background that we created, and this is why I made it the 4.25 by 5.5 inches, because I am just going to go ahead and press that right down onto the back of it. It's super easy to line up because the pieces are the exact same size. The only thing that I forgot to do, which you'll see me do in a minute, is that bottom piece doesn't have any foam tape on it. So it's going to kind of be flapping around because it doesn't have anything to make it raise up like the rest of it. So you'll see me bend it back, and I'm just going to go ahead and add some pieces there. And once that's done, the last thing that we have to do before we put it on a card base is attach the football player to the front to make it look like he's running through that burst. So I'm going to take the leftover foam tape and just kind of put it into place. I'm only going to use 1 layer on this because it's already thick enough with the shaker pieces in there and the 2 layers of foam. So I don't want it to be that much thicker. So I'm just going to cut down the remaining pieces, do 1 layer, peel off the backing of it, and attach it to the card front. And then once the card front is done, I shake it to make sure all those shaker pieces move. And then the last thing that we have to do is attach it to a card base. So I'm doing a top fold light gray card base. This is Recollections 110-pound cardstock. And I'm using my Be Creative Honeybee glue to attach it. And it'll just take a minute for that to dry and adhere. And that's the card for the Sparkle Blends Guest Designer series. So I hope that you guys enjoyed it. If you have comments or questions, please feel free to leave them below, and I'll see you guys again real soon for another video. Bye!